Outdoorsmen of Reddit, what's your most terrifying encounter in the woods? In the 90s, I was on a week-long backpacking trip with my uncle in the Colorado high country. He was a professional rock climbing trail guide at the time, so he knew his stuff while off the grid. The second day in, we were following some old trail that hadn't been groomed in years, and came across the outskirts of some random commune deep in the woods. We knew there were people there because we could see campfires and laughing/talking in the distance. My uncle immediately freaks out, tells me to keep quiet, and then made us backtrack nearly 5 miles, and then around. It was the first and only time I've actually seen him panic off the grid. Afterward, he lectured me that it was some kind of small sect or cult that had a rep for being very territorial in the area at the time, and was known to shoot at trespassers without provocation. Man, I don't even go out that often, but the one time I do I found a severed ear on a hiking path. When I was like 14, I was hunting deer with my dad and heard a weird sizzle. I heard 2 more, and my dad screamed at me to get down. It was the sound of another hunter shooting in our direction. He hadn't seen us, despite the orange. I will never forget that sound. It's a very different experience being on the other end of the bullet. Had an overcurious bear climb up the tree I was in during a hunt, and man, I almost jumped out of the tree. He just wanted to say hi, but shit, I definitely was scared to death. Slipped and tumbled backwards head over heels down a rock face. There was about a 20-foot drop after that, but I got wedged in between a tree and the rock face. Ended up walking away with just a couple bruises. Another time in the Sierra Nevadas, I fell through a hole that was covered in snow. My rifle stopped me from falling straight through, and I yelled for help. When I was getting pulled out, all I saw was a black hole beneath me that covered in snow again. No idea how deep it was or if anyone would have heard me if I just poofed through the snow into a crevasse. When I was hunting in northern Michigan, I saw a clearly mentally ill guy wandering around mindlessly in the distance with a machete. Chills went straight down my spine, and I got the hell out of there before we made eye contact. Just imagine how panicked I was finding my way out of the woods, hearing the leaves crunch and the critters moving through the tall grass. The woods in Sweden is not exactly known for dangerous animals. Sure, there are brown bears, lynxes, elks, and boars, but nothing really to be afraid of, especially not near urban areas. So I was out in the forest looking for mushrooms when suddenly all of my field of view was filled with something black, screaming like a demon from hell. Turn out a western capercaillie, fairly big bird, was hiding under bush near the path, and got scared and flew away when I got too close. I used to go running with my dad a lot. We almost always brought our dog, because we would be running through fields and woods and stuff like that, and there were no people or cars around, so we always let her run without a leash. At about a quarter of the distance, there is a little river crossing the track with a sloping riverside path. The doggie loved to run ahead and jump straight in the water. On this day, however, we did not hear the usual splashing sounds, so we went a little faster. Well, we found the dog on the riverside path, with her nose deep between the butt cheeks of a completely naked man, who happened to take his no less naked female acquaintance in missionary there. Looks of mutual horror were thrown around until my dad called back our dog and we continued running while pretending that nothing has happened. My dad and I went backpacking a few years back. We got to the trailhead later than we had planned and decided we were going to start the hike anyways. 4 hours later, the sun is going down and we still had over an hour left till we got to a suitable site to drop down. We're now hiking in the dark with our headlamps when we hear a low growl 20 or so feet off the trail from us. Then we heard something large moving through the underbrush and trees. We both looked at each other and basically ran up the trail as best we could in the dark on a rocky hill. It was 15 minutes before we stopped to catch our breaths. Never saw it, but hearing it so close by gave me a shot of primal fear that I didn't know I had. Had a truck pull into my deserted primitive camping area on national forest land around 2 a.m. and stop right next to my tent. Now, in context, I was camping alone. This was a designated camping area, and I was the farthest back from the road, a good 200 feet. I had no fire going. Still visible from the road, though. Anyone just wanting to turn around could have done so right at the front. Around 2 a.m., this truck comes in, drives all the way back to my tent, and stops right next to it, just sitting there. I could tell the type of vehicle by the silhouette its headlights cast through my tent. There was absolutely no legitimate reason for anyone to do that. So I'm there, in my small A-frame tent, which I'd made the bad judgment of setting up with its door towards the road, thus providing me no cover to exit, and all I can do is sit there in my tent with my AR-15 at the ready, freezing my butt off in 39-degree weather because I had to crawl out of my sleeping bag and was just in my underwear, knowing if they mean harm and there's more than one person I'm almost certainly dead because I'm a sitting duck. Note, I had the AR-15 in the tent with me because it was bear country. Fortunately for me, they probably decided there wasn't anything worth stealing and left after a few minutes without getting out of their vehicle. All my valuable stuff was locked up in my SUV, and all I had visible was some cookware and a small camp stove. I learned a few things from that. 1. Get a bigger tent that I can more easily move around in and it's quicker to get out of, and 2. Always set your tent up with the door facing away from the road to provide some degree of concealment if you need to exit. Remember, folks, not all predators walk on 4 legs. Some walk on 2. Hiking in Colorado through some old train tunnels with a friend, not far off from a fairly populated area. The train tunnels were fascinating, blasted out of mountain with some quite long/requiring headlamps, but definitely wouldn't want to be there alone. We eventually dead-ended, so backtracking the way we came. As we exited one tunnel, there was a severed deer head in the middle of the path that wasn't there the first time we walked through. Not a recent kill, but still fully fleshed. On our way into the area, there were some tents that were clearly used by homeless individuals maybe 150 yards off the path. We took it as a clear sign we weren't welcome and needed to leave immediately. Outdoorswoman here, lol. I use the term lightly. When I was in my early 20s, my friends and I thought it would be a brilliant idea to go night hiking through some woods said to be haunted. It was a very old town that died out due to some illness. I believe the rumor said tuberculosis. You can walk the horse path and there are stone foundations on either side of you. Really neat, actually. You were supposed to be able to hear children laughing and dancing in the trees, apparently. Yeah, didn't hear any children laughing, but I did record our whole hike. That night, going over the footage with a friend of mine on his TV, he told me to stop and rewind. I did, and we must have rewound that thing 30 times. There was a face peeking behind trees following us. Not a human face, a weird gremlin-type face, distorted. Large sunken eyes and a flat nose, pointy chin. We thought we were seeing things, but we watched it so many times, adjusted the brightness and contrast on his TV. Sure as shit. Never went back. Partner and I set off for a weekend camping trip in the Rocky Mountains after work on a Friday. Late start, so we didn't get to the road we were looking to camp off of until late. It was getting dark. We found a cleared area, parked my Jeep and hastily set up our 2.5-person tent, threw in our sleeping arrangements and dog, and hopped in the tent for the night. We were playing a board game sitting cross-legged around 9 p.m. when something swiped at the back of my head through the tent wall. We panicked a bit, used remote start on the car to scare whatever it was off. I tried to convince myself and my partner that it was a falling stick. There was no wind and we were in a clearing. The next morning, we came to discover that we were about 10 feet from a half-eaten deer in a mountain lion's pantry. I got pet on the head by a mountain lion. Mind you, I'm well above average height and this kitty was taller than me sitting down. I was backcountry camping in Yosemite, between Half Dome and Cloud's Rest, with some friends. Meaning we had regular tents/sleeping bags far out on the hiking trails away from the village. Sleeping around the fire pit were 2 tents and 1 guy in a bivy sack. It's like a bag your sleeping bag goes in to protect you from mosquitoes or dew. Around 6 a.m., just as the sun was coming up, I was awoken to the sound of soft but heavy footsteps and heavy breathing outside of my tent. I then heard heavy sniffing from the direction of where I had propped my backpack up against a tree. Then the sniffing stopped, and in front of my tent entrance I saw a 3-foot-tall 250-plus-pound black bear walk over to the fire pit and start sniffing the pit. It was probably about 10 feet from the entrance to my tent. After about 30 seconds of sniffing the pit, the bear walked over to my friend who's snoring away, on his back, face up, in his bivy sack, and began to sniff my friend's chest and face. The bear's nose was about 5 inches from my friend's face. All the while my friend was still sleeping. I knew if I made noise to scare the bear, there's a chance I could wake up my friend, which would in turn startle the bear, and then my friend might not have a face, if you get my drift. After about 30 seconds of sniffing my friend, the bear plodded off to where we had our bear canister wedged in a tree and knocked it about 50 feet down the trail. It never opened it. Thank you for watching, friend. Until next time, and remember to stay hydrated.